You are listening to the Beltway Wars Invitational Podcast, hosted by Adam Jackson and Patrick Wilton. Enjoy the show.
And welcome back to the Beltway Wars Invitational Podcast Playoff Edition with your hosts Adam Jackson and Patrick Wilton. As always, going over the three playoff matchups that we had this week. Two very close games, one not so close. As we get to the playoffs and into it and seeing who's going to get that coveted BWI championship this year. Pat, I know that you had a pretty bad loss against Dustin, only by 2 points. We'll get into the specifics about it, but how did you feel about it? Did you feel good about it? And then not so good going into the final day? How did you feel about playoffs in general?
Yeah, 2 out of 3 of the games decided by less than 2 points. So two really, really close matchups. I unfortunately came out on the losing end of one of those. It had a feeling going into last night. Dustin had 4 players going. Basically, there were 4 teams playing Monday Night Football. He had a player on each of the offenses. So there wasn't a snap last night of the 4 teams that Dustin did not have the opportunity to score points. He barely scratched out enough to come from behind. Hawkinson, a Hawkinson touchdown would have done it for me. I think Hawkinson had 7 points. Jefferson got the touchdown, who was on Dustin's team. So, it came down to which Vikings guy was going to get the touchdown, and it happened to break against me. So, kind of a stressful game to watch when you're, up by 35 points or so, and Dustin has literally players scoring points on every snap. Frustrating to watch, but whatever, it happens. Wish the best for Dustin. Be nice to see somebody else win a championship, and we've got 2 teams in contention that have not yet won a BWI title, so that's exciting.
Yeah, very interesting. Like I said, very close games. I mean, 2 of them decided by less than 2 points, really. So let's just get in. Well, not less than 2, but 2 points around. But let's just get into our first matchup, which is going to be the highest scoring matchup of the weekend. 2 teams, Scott getting into the 7th spot into the playoffs. Really gives Sarah a run for her money, but she comes out on top at the end of week 15, 150.30 to 148.98. Sarah with the victory, moving on to the next round. I'm going to play a little sound.
The only thing I'm addicted to right now is winning.
So she wins this one. Just going through her starting roster here, Jalen Hurts, nice day here. He always seems to get a rushing touchdown. 25 or 32, 290, 2 touchdowns, 15 carries, 45 yards, a touchdown. Did lose a fumble for 28 points. Chase Brown, the trade acquisition in the middle of the season, 25 carries, 97 yards, a touchdown. 3 catches for 16 and a touchdown, 24 points on the day for Chase Brown against Tennessee. Devin Achane, 12 carries, 41 yards, but makes it up in the air, 7 for 7, 35 for 11.10 points. CeeDee Lamb, even with Cooper Rush at the helm, still producing pretty well, 9 for 13, 116 and a touchdown, 22 points against Carolina. DeAndre Hopkins, 5 for 6, 36 for 6 points against Cleveland. Ladd McConkey, 5 for 7, 58 yards and a touchdown, 14 points on the week. Cole Kmet, who had to have been, Evan Ingram was out, so he was a fill-in there. Might be a fill-in for next week as well. Only had 1 catch for 14 yards, 1.9 points against Minnesota. Dave Montgomery, who we're going to talk about in a second, 5 carries, 4 yards, 4 for 4, 31, 5.50 points. McLaughlin has 18, and the Dallas defense starting them against Carolina also has 18 points as well. On the bench, Tajay Spears had a pretty nice day here, very much involved in the passing game. 6 for 7, 87 out of touchdown for 24.20 points. George Pickens was out of this one. Evan Ingram is out for the year. Pat, I mean, the highest score of the week, and she needed every single one of those points to beat Scott, who, really surged near the end of the season, but she comes out on top.
She did, and she did it with, some injury things here. I mean, George Pickens missed his second straight game with an injury. In a good kind of interstate game between the Eagles and the Steelers. Pickens misses this one. Evan Engram, misses this game, goes on IR. He's done for the year. Not that he was providing a ton of boost to Sarah's team, but neither really has Cole Kmet, who got the start for Sarah in this one. And then also loses David Montgomery in this game, loses him in the middle of the game. He only ends up with 5 carries. He's going to miss the rest of the year. Certainly the fantasy season is over for David Montgomery. Winds up with just 5 fantasy points. This is a guy that Sarah has been relying on for the entire season. He's constantly, good for touchdowns in every game that he's played, except for 4, including this one. He exits with just 30% of the snaps in this game in a high-scoring game against Buffalo. So she put up a huge, really impressive 150 points with a guy playing half a game and some other players on the bench with injuries, and does it with huge point totals from CeeDee Lamb and Ladd McConkey, who's turned into a really kind of reliable fantasy guy for Sarah. He's now 11 or more fantasy points in each of his last 4 games that he's played. She's just getting consistent production up and down this lineup. And then at quarterback, Hurts 28, and on the bench Mayfield 28. And you can't stop talking about this team without mentioning the kicker and the defense, something that we love to see it and we hate to see it at the same time. Kicker and defense combining for 36.4 points. Huge reason why Sarah pulled off this win.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple things that, we're going to go more in depth with these teams since we only had 3 matchups this week. Talking about the loss of Dave Montgomery, huge loss, ranked number 13 on the season for running backs. Devin Achane has been kind of slow the past couple weeks. He's still ranked number 8. But, you look at his fantasy numbers, you're like, oh, not so bad, but the rushing production. I mean, look at the last 4 weeks: 3.2, 2, 1.7, 3.4. So very low yards per carry, but he really saves his fantasy value by the amount of balls that he catches out of the backfield. Is this any bit a little concerning that he's paying around 60% of the snaps, 65% of the snaps, and he seems to be doing most of his work out of the backfield? I could just envision a scenario where Tua has a bad game and he doesn't rush the ball well and has a horrible game in which Sarah really needs him to flourish now that Dave Montgomery's out of the picture.
Yeah, it's interesting. He kind of has a safe floor. If you look at his last, I don't know,
5.
most of the season.
Yeah.
Early in the season he had some games where he struggled in weeks 3 through 5, but basically since then his floor is like 9 or 10 points. So you're not going to get like a 3-point game that you might get from a running back that is a pure running back only that isn't catching passes. So you might get a 10 for 30 game out of a plodding running back against a good defense. Achane, you're at least safe. He's getting between 7 and 10 targets in his last 3 games. He's catching most of those passes for 30, 40, 50 yards. So because he's catching, those passes in a half-point PPR league, 6 catches is 3 points. So 3 points and then tack on whatever yardage he gets on the ground or through the air, and you're at a safe, 10 points basically. So at least you're getting the floor play. You haven't gotten the 20-point game since week 9, but next week at versus San Francisco, not a great matchup. It's decent, but I think you're at least getting that safe production out of Devin Achan.
Yeah, I'm just kind of comparing this to last year. I'm just gonna take look at last year real quick. You know, looking at he has 100-yard carry day against Baltimore, 73. Early in the season, 203 yards, 101, 151. You're just not seeing that type of rushing production. I don't think he hasn't rushed for 100 yards this season, and he's played all his games. So I just think it's a tiny bit concerning. It's just a little nervousness, I guess, I would have with Devin Achan, just that he's so reliant on Tua trying to find him the ball. Now he has been. I mean, the last 8 weeks, it's been 8, 8, 5, 4, 4, 9, 7, 7 targets. So I mean, they're finding him the ball that way, but it's just a little bit concerning that if those targets go away just one of these weeks, the rushing production has not been there.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so another.
Sure. Let me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to bring up the quarterback question here, and just to ask. I mean, look, Hurts is the number 3 quarterback, but Baker Mayfield on the bench is the number 5 quarterback. So 2 top 5 quarterbacks on this team. Next week, Jalen Hurts is going to be at Washington, and Baker Mayfield has the Cowboys coming up. Boy, would it. They're at Dallas, by the way, but Dallas is a team that can be exploited, versus good offenses. Is this a question here, or is this a no-brainer? You just start. I say start your stud, but they're both kind of studs. We don't think of Baker Mayfield in that context because this is kind of a new Baker Mayfield, but like for the purposes of 2024, he's been a stud. So like, is there a question here that you might consider Baker?
I think it's a conversation you can have with yourself, but going into the playoffs, what are you looking for? You're looking for consistency in numbers, the safer play. And I think that Jalen Hurts, with the rushing ability, anytime they get on the 1 or 2, they're running the ball. And I mean, how many rushing touchdowns does he have this season? Let's see. 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, 10. 11, 12, 13, 14. He has 14 rushing touchdowns. So you're looking for that high floor with these types of players. I think Jalen Hurts gives you more of that safety net there. I mean, looking at Baker Mayfield, you're saying, okay, yeah, he's been very good this season. But look at the last time he played Carolina, 10 points. That's a plus matchup, and he didn't do very well in that game. So you just want to avoid those duds going into the fantasy playoffs. You can't afford to have 10 points going out of your quarterback. So I think just Jalen Hurts against Washington, the big divisional game against them, I think that's the smarter play. The next kind of thing I wanted to mention with her squad is, not too many options on the bench. You have George Pickens here that he misses practice on Tuesday, so his availability against Baltimore, who do play on Saturday this week, is in question. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, not really too much. I mean, 12, 11, 11, 6. Plays against Houston here. Let's say that Pickens gets in, a couple limited. Maybe there's some news about a snap count going for George Pickens. Are you playing George Pickens on a snap count over DeAndre Hopkins?
Well, remember, she's losing Montgomery.
Yeah.
So she needs to replace Montgomery in the lineup. So I think she might be starting both of these guys. Unless you're comfortable with Tajay Spears, who kind of had a funky game, right? Like 6 for 7 through the air, 87 yards and a touchdown. Also had a touchdown on 4 carries for 5 yards.
I will also say that Pollard did leave this game for like a quarter, I think it was, and then returned. I don't think that he's getting that goal line carry with Pollard on the field, where the rushing touchdown there. So that number, that 24 number, is a little bit misleading. But if Pollard is out, I think Tajay Spears is a definite start.
Well, I guess we should say that maybe the one thing that Hopkins has going for him, and he's 5 years removed from playing for the Texans, but to the extent that you could call this a revenge game, I don't know, the terms of how that relationship ended of Hopkins being the Texans, but it was his first team in the National Football League from 2013 through 2019, so quite a bit removed from that, but not sure if there's maybe a little bit of extra motivation to get him the ball in
Yeah,
that
it's
game.
true.
So that could be something. I mean, if Pickens is playing, you got to think that I feel like you'd get him in there. At least he has a Saturday game, so he will be playing the Ravens. I mean, playing the Ravens, boy. I mean, that it'd be hard for me if Pickens is playing to sit him, given that you're really missing, somebody in this lineup like a Montgomery. I think you need that high upside play for Pickens, even if the word is that he could be on a snap count. But you got to follow the news until we get to Saturday to make that determination.
And I will say, because they play Saturday, I'm talking straight to Sarah right now. I'm looking right in the camera. Use your auto sub starter for this. This is what you should use. You should put in Pickens and then auto sub it for DeAndre Hopkins. Is what you should do.
Don't. Yeah, I guess. But
Oh, I mean, that's the only other wire. I mean, who else are you going to play? I mean, are you going to play
there's not
Kendrick
a lot.
Bourne? I mean, but use the auto starter in case he's out to cover yourself so we don't get a text message from Charlie saying, hey, can you add Sarah on there? That'd be kind of funny,
Well, but
actually, if we. Well, she's not playing. She's not playing Charlie, but
But here's the thing: like you could theoretically decide, assuming Pollard is healthy, that Hopkins is a better start than Spears. Like we haven't seen this from Spears
yeah,
at all. So if that's the case, you would not want to
that's true.
lock the auto sub up because you might be sliding Hopkins into your flex spot.
Yeah.
So yeah,
But
it's
then
a tricky
what's?
situation.
But like, let's say Pickens is out. It's like you got to play another wide receiver there.
Yeah, right. If he's out, yeah, it's not a problem. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
So
All right.
yeah, sucks that she's dealing with injuries here, down the stretch, but obviously still plenty of firepower. That midseason trade that she made with me for Chase Brown, you're
Yeah.
welcome. That has paid off dividends.
And I
He
mean,
is
it paid
a
off even more now that Dave Montgomery's out. I mean, she has a 1 and a 2. They're pretty secure.
Yep.
I think I like Chase Brown more than I do Devin Achane right now, but
Right now, yeah, absolutely.
but
Hard to argue with that.
yeah. So I mean, she has 2 top line running backs. Wide receivers are a little bit of a question. Tight end, definitely a question, I would say. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit. With Cole Kmet now tight end number 17, he's replacing Evan Ingram. I don't know what the waiver wire looks like, but that might be something that you have to look at because he doesn't have a spot in this offense. It's Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze, DJ Moore. DJ Moore getting carries out of the backfield last night, so that was kind of
Yeah,
interesting.
couple.
As
Yeah.
well. So yeah, just
2 in a row.
that's a decision you have to make. Maybe Cole Kmet's the best that's out there, but 1.9 points, in the playoffs, only 1 target. That's not what you like to see out of your tight end spot. But let's go over to the Westminster Wonder Boys, 7-7 on the season, eliminated by 2 points, 148.98.
Emotional damage.
Scored the second most points, but just runs into the Sarah Buzzsaw in week 15. Starting with this roster, Josh Allen making the late, push for an MVP trophy this year. 41 points on the day, 23 for 34, 362, 2 touchdowns. Also runs for 68 yards and 2 touchdowns as well. The whole Buffalo offense runs through Josh Allen, literally and figuratively. He does it all. 41 points after, last week, which he had the greatest fantasy start, fantasy day of a quarterback ever against the Rams. So, 2 games he scored 90 points just by himself, which is unheard of. But not enough for Scott this week. Gerardo here, 16 carries, 57 yards, 4 for 418. Third running back on San Francisco, 9 points. Kind of the magic ran out for him. Bijan Robinson also had a good day, but really would have changed Scott's outcome with a touchdown, 22 carries, 125, 1 for 2, 10 yards for 14 points against Vegas. Jared Judy, who really came on, talking about people that came on late, had a really nice day, 11 for 14, 108, 16 points. Ray McCloud, 1 for 3, 14, 1.9. Terry McLaurin, 7 for 10, 73, 2 touchdowns. Sam Laporta also had a nice day, 7 for 10, 111 against Buffalo in their loss. Zach Charbonnet, filling in for Kenneth Walker, 8 for 54, a touchdown. Little involvement in the pass game, 1 for 4, 12 yards for 13 points. Jake Elliott has 10, and the Jets have 5. On the bench, maybe not, well, I guess not really. Sort of an interesting play, I would say. Michael Pittman on the bench. Kind of interesting to me. He scores 6.8. And maybe that's where we want to start with, dissecting Scott's starts and sits here. Raymond McLeod versus Michael Pittman. I mean, Raymond McLeod had 2 straight games of 11 or over 10 points, but Michael Pittman, high draft pick, has been disappointing for being such a high draft pick. But if he would have started him, he would have been moving on to the next round.
Yeah, either Cook or Pitts would have gotten the Cooks or Pitts would have gotten the or Cooks or Pittman would have gotten the job done here. Finally got it right on the third try. It had to just be a volume play. I mean, just looking at last week, of the 3 guys he had to pick from, Ray McLeod did have the most targets. He had 11. He was 8 for 11 last week. So no doubt influenced a little bit potentially by, that line from last week, and had 2 straight games of 10 or more fantasy points. So, kind of a toss-up, made the wrong call there. And it certainly hurt him. But the other storyline, and you alluded to it when you were talking about a couple of these players going through the lineup, is a bunch of players on this starting lineup that play for bad teams that didn't score a lot of points, and it kept them out of the end zone. And I'm talking about Guerrero with the 49ers.
Yeah.
They scored 6 points, no touchdown for him. Bijan Robinson, they scored 15 points, no touchdown for him. Jerry Jeudy, they scored 7 points, no touchdown for him. And Sam Laporta, they scored a lot of points. He doesn't get into the end zone, unfortunately. 7 for 10, 111 yards. Like, volume across here. I mean, you're looking at Laporta with 10 targets, McLaurin with 10 targets, Jeudy 14, Robinson with 22 carries. Like, the volume was good. It's just these offenses that are not, average to below average, couldn't get into the end zone as much, and these players just didn't have the opportunity to hit pay dirt. If any one of these guys gets into the end zone that I mentioned, we're talking about a different result for Scott.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't really, in fantasy football, touchdowns are just, random. You can, the way you play it is you look for the people that are touching the ball the most, getting the most targets, doing the most efficiency with their targets, and things like that. I mean, the efficiency with the targets, other than Ray McLeod, was phenomenal. I mean, 7 for 10, 7 for 10, 11 for 14. So any one of those guys could have gotten into the end zone. It just didn't happen. I do like your point that they do play on bad teams, some bad quarterback play as well. Jared Jeudy, Jameis Winston was benched in this one. Ray McLeod, they're talking about Kirk Cousins losing the starting job after this performance. Zach Charbonnet, just a bad Seattle offense. Geno Smith's not looking the same. So, yeah, I mean, there's something to that. But again, you think about, pass catchers. If you're on bad teams, you should be behind, and that should give you more opportunities. It just didn't work for Ray McLeod. I mean, just looking at it, 41% snap count, his lowest of the season. I don't think he was hurt. It didn't say anything that he wasn't, but this is what, again, I was talking about with Sarah's squad. what are you looking at in terms of, you know, the the floor of each player? Who has the best opportunity to have the highest floor? I don't know if I would have went Ray McCloud other than Michael Pittman. Of course, hindsight's 2020, whatever. But Michael Pittman's the number one option on that team, so I feel like he would have more opportunities. Where Ray McCloud's, the third. I mean, they have Darnell Mooney. They have Drake London, who's going to get his looks. Kyle Pitts is still there. He's going to get his sort of looks, whatever he does. Bijan Robinson as well. So I think McCloud just kind of got lost in the shuffle of that bad quarterback play as well this week. I mean, he's scoring 15 points. You're not going to get that much out of your, third or fourth option in an offense where you only score 15 points.
Yeah, and I feel really bad for Scott. I feel worse for Scott than I do for myself. Like so we've talked about that he had the top point total in each of the last 2 weeks. He has the second highest point total this week of the entire league. This is playoff teams, this is all teams, all 12.
Right.
He had the second highest and he loses. Just from a storyline arc of Scott's season, these guys have really come on. I mean, Josh Allen the last 3 weeks is doing superhuman things.
Yeah.
I mean, he's had just 51 points followed by a 41-point game, against the Lions. Like, that's crazy. Bijan Robinson has been, early in the season we talked about, how is he really going to return his draft value? He ends up the season as the number 5 running back as of now. Like, he turned it on. Jerry Jeudy, you get the quarterback change. He has been playing out of his mind. Terry McLaurin, like, coming on. So Laporta started the season with the tight end morass that was all the issues. He works himself up to tight end number 10. He's had, basically double-digit performances every other game, essentially, when he gets into the end zone, typically. He gets the volume. Like, so many good things that have just been trending up for Scott. It's just a shame to lose it as your team is, like, as hot as they've been all season.
Yeah, and I mean, even, like, the Kenneth Walker Charbonnet news, like, getting that extra guy to get all the volume in on offense, and he's very talented. He's a very talented young player. Getting all that volume, that's just an extra boost to, Bijan Robinson, Josh Allen, and Jared Jeudy have they've been playing. That's just like house money right there. Can't convert it this week out of the playoffs, 148. But like you said, I mean, running back number 5, quarterback number 2, Jared Jeudy, he has to be up. Wide receiver number 5 for Terry McLaurin. Where's Jeudy at? Jeudy is wide receiver number 10. So, I mean, a lot of top 10 talent on this team. And, just really got unlucky this week. And just, I wouldn't say questionable, but just kind of like, I don't know if I would have started him over him. But, you can, we just look at it like this and, it just is what it is. So.
Yep. Two thoughts quick. Unrelated to this team.
You can do it not quick.
I like the house money thing. Like, that could be a segment. Playing with house money. Like, who are we playing with house money this week? Like, who is a roster find that you got from free agency or waivers?
That maybe wasn't good, like, when you picked them up, but now has a prominent role.
Yeah, who's returning those dividends? Like you said, playing with house money. Also, thinking about that, like, that's the kind of guy that we used to give the CarMax Steal of the Year award to. Like, should we bring trophies back?
That is all you, buddy. You have multiple years of writing up trophies.
No, but not writing them. Like, writing is like so last century. Like, now we have a podcast. Like, we have a podcast.
We could do it. I kind of like that. We could do with our draft recaps, but have a segment with awards, the awards show.
Yeah.
Or the awards segment.
I mean, like you could pick some candidates for each award, and then I could, and we make our case, and then we try to come to a consensus. Like, I think that'd be a fun show.
Oh, okay, we can do that during the season finale. We'll have a nice little awards segment. I'll have to figure out what type of voice I want to do for that.
I think that's a whole other podcast. I think we have enough podcast ideas to. Well, never mind.
Well, just the season recap's going to be 5 hours long.
Well,
But
that's
yeah,
why I'm saying different show, different show.
but yeah,
Award.
yeah, I like the idea. So
Yeah. Okay.
maybe
All
that'll
right.
be a little thing for you just to get the trophies in order. We can talk about it. But yeah,
No,
one
no,
of
no. That's not the point. We have to talk and come to a
no, I mean get
consensus.
all the trophies that we're gonna like the categories together,
Yeah,
and
we'll
then we
have to
can go.
remember
This is behind the show talk, but
behind the
let's just
show.
get
Yeah,
back to
yeah.
it. So I mean, one of the most exciting matchups I can remember in playoff history. I mean, one of the highest scoring ones for sure. Didn't disappoint, but is disappointing for Scott as his season ends on, I guess, a high note, low note, whatever. But 7-7, making a run, just couldn't get it done against Sarah this week. But let's go over to our next matchup. I guess it's going to be Jake versus Brian here. The one little, I guess you could consider this a blowout in the first round of the playoffs. The Carlisle Cheddar got 122.96, defeating the Conkeysville Conks 84.36. Looking at Jake's roster, starts Jordan Love. The right decision here. 20 for 27, 229, 2 touchdowns, 17 points, respectable. They scored 30, so you're hoping for a little bit more, but he didn't need it in this one. Saquon Barkley has a down game. 19 carries, 65 yards, 2 for 2 for 9 for only 8.4 points. Alvin Kamara, who we're going to talk about a little bit here, 5 carries, 12 yards, 4 for 5, 58, and a touchdown for 15 points. Garrett Wilson, 3 for 6, 56, and a touchdown, 13.10 points. Devontae Adams, 9 for 12, 198, 2 touchdowns, and a 2-point conversion for 38 points. And against Jacksonville, Jalen Reed, has a better day than he did last week. 5 for 6, 34, 3 carries for 27, 8.6 points. K. Dotton continues to struggle with volume now that Mike Evans is back. 2 for 3, 24, 3.4 points. Tyron Tracy, 10 carries, 31, 1 for 4 through the air, 4 yards, 4 points. Jason Sanders, 8 points, and Pittsburgh's defense was 6. On the bench, couple little things, and I want to see that if you'll mention this or not. But, just some middling guys. You have, Elijah Mitchell doesn't do anything. Mike Williams, he's lost in the depth chart there in Pittsburgh. Jawan Johnson to Kyle Pitts, nothing. But, looking at it, he gets the win, moves on to the next round, and faces the juggernaut Charlie next week.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, like a lot of this damage was done by Devontae Adams. I mean, there's a lot of single-digit scores on this team, so Jake is pretty fortunate that Brian just had an absolute miserable week, who we'll get to in a moment. But I mean, boy, I mean, I guess if you're gonna have a dud in the fantasy playoffs and still get a win, you kind of hope that gets it out of the system. I mean, Barkley not getting into the end zone, like that's only his third single-digit performance of the year. Granted, against a really tough Pittsburgh defense. Goes into Washington in Week 16 here. But yeah, I mean, Jake was texting me a little bit through this game, and he was so relieved for Devontae Adams, especially after the first touchdown, even more so after the second touchdown, that his former Packer coming through here with Aaron Rodgers. Like there's some sweet storylines going on for Jake here. Wilson actually got the first touchdown of that game, and I had texted him when that happened. So we talked about it. Those guys were going to be key for him. Both of those guys coming through. I think I said last week, you need either a big game from one of them or you need decent games from both of them. And he gets a decent game from Wilson and he gets a great game from Adams.
Yeah.
It put him over the top by far here. 38 points is one of the higher totals for a wide receiver on the year. Just 2 yards short of a 200-yard game for Adams. So really nice to see. But a lot to be desired elsewhere on this roster. Tracy only getting 10 carries. Otten continues to sort of be a middling tight end since Mike Evans came back. We've talked about it time and time again. Doesn't really have too many options on the bench that performed well either. So lineup looking a little bit thin right now. I can tell you there was some guessing games going on. Some second thoughts about having Jaden Reed in the
Oh,
lineup.
your
Um,
sources tell you?
and my sources tell me that there was a little bit of thought that, can is there a way to get him out of the lineup?
Yeah.
He does get 6 targets in this, which is a little bit better than he's had as of late. It's his, he's kind of been more in the 1 to 3 range for the majority of games in the second half of the season. So he gets those 6 targets. The Packers win, but he does not get into the end zone. So I mean, I guess we've buried the lead here.
Yeah.
But before we get to Alvin Kamara, is there anything else that you're looking at here, thinking like this is problematic, or he needs this or that to go right for him next week?
Um, I'm concerned. Really concerned for Alvin Kamara. He's number 6 running back in fantasy this year. The Saints are out of it. Like, they're done. They
Yeah.
fired their head
Yeah.
coach. They're doing rookie quarterback. He got benched. They put in Spencer Rattler. They have nothing to play for. So why would you play him? Like, if he's hurt,
Yeah.
like they're not making a playoff push, anything like that. I could foresee a thing where they just shut him down for the season. Now that leaves a glaring hole at that second running back spot. You had to assume you're going to put Tracy in there and just hope for the best. But Tyron Tracy is a low end running back 2, high end running back 3, where Kamara is a running back 1. So you're losing a ton of value right there. Yeah, I'm very concerned about that. I'd be scouring practice reports every day if I was Jake, just to hope that he for some reason plays next week.
Well, here's the thing, and this would have been a really bigger problem for Jake in previous years, but Alvin Kamara plays the Monday night game against the Packers. Of course, the Packers, right, for Jake. So that's the last game on the slate for Week 16. So, like, thank goodness for Jake that we have the auto sub here, or else he could potentially be looking at a game time decision for one of his best players on the Monday night game. So he is very likely, assuming that Kamara is going to be, just assume that he's going to be questionable throughout the week, and you kind of got to make provisions. You're going to have to play. You're going to have to put Tracy in that auto sub spot for Kamara.
But that also leaves a void at the flex. And
It
that's kind of
does. Yep.
what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about. Let's say Kamara plays. So he plays, he sticks it out, whatever. Jalen Reed versus Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams on a very high flying offense. Now the dynamic changes a tiny bit with Dave Montgomery being out. You don't have 2 mouths to feed in running backs, you only have 1. They seem to like to not give Gibbs a full workload, like to throw the ball around a little bit. Jameson Williams, snap percentages, 87% last week. So he's on the field. He's their deep threat.
Yep.
Amon Ra is kind of the short, crosser. Jameson Williams really takes the overhead deep shots. Jalen Reed, looking at him now, 59% snap count. After last week where he had 50. Not on the field as much. Returns kicks, things like that. Is that a discussion? The Packers next week play, as you said, the Saints. Detroit plays, who do they play? They play Chicago at Chicago next week, which weather concerning also as well.
Tough.
What are you thinking there for next week?
Well, you're gonna have to start both of them. You're gonna have to start both of them because, again, assuming Kamara is going to be questionable throughout the week, if we get to Sunday and Kamara is still game time decision, questionable, whatever, Tracy has to be the auto sub.
Yeah.
So you need a fourth receiver.
Yeah.
Reed stays in the lineup. You need to pick from one of these other bench players to insert to the flex, and in that case, Jameson is the clear favorite. By the way, Jameson Williams obviously was the question Jake posed to me before this matchup was, hey, would you go Jameson Williams or would you go Reed? And I said, that's a coin flip to me. I preferred the volume that Williams has had recently, but he and I both kind of thought, and the reason that Jake ultimately kept Reed in is if he lost, he would not want to lose with Reed on the bench and him blowing up. You could tolerate it a little bit more with JMO, potentially. But both of those guys, in my mind, again, it's all in the Kamara thing. If Kamara is still game time decision questionable, both of these receivers are going to be in the starting lineup. There's nobody else on this team, whether it's Juwan Johnson, Kyle Pitts, no. Maybe you consider Elijah Moore, who has had some pretty kind of up and down games, but is only a few weeks removed from a 14 target game.
Yeah.
Last time he played Cincinnati, who that'll be his opponent this week, he went 6 for 6. So, in a pinch, you could go that direction. Potentially best case scenario
is that Kamara practices Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, if he's ruled out, at least you get the clarity and you get the slot.
That's true as well.
Tracy in there, and then you're starting. But it's not terrible. Like, okay, it's Jameson Williams, Jaden Reed. I don't hate that as a 3-4.
No, for sure not. I guess my last question with Jake Squad is, the tight end position. He's carrying 3 tight ends now. Cade Otton has struggled since Mike Evans has come back. I think Mike Evans came back after the bye. He hasn't scored over 9 points since then. Is that a discussion? Do you take the risk and go Kyle Pitts there? Maybe with Michael Penix now throwing the ball, tight ends are rookie quarterbacks' best friends. So is that a bridge too far to go? Or do you just stick with Cade Otton? He's been so good all year, and you're just hoping that he has 1 or 2 more, 2 touchdown games.
I mean, again, flip a coin on that one.
Great podcast. No hot takes, just fence sitting.
I mean, I'm not excited about either one. Both have a tough matchup next week. I mean, you say, okay, the Giants, but then you look like the Giants are, according to this, one of the better teams at defending tight ends. They don't give a lot of points up.
They just can't defend anybody else. That's the problem.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, but again, there's question marks. Saquon, if he's going to have a dud game this one where you're going to win by 40. So you're okay with that. But going on to the next round, playing the number 1 seed. Yes.
No, so I thought when you were saying going on to the next, I thought you were going to say the next team that we need to talk about. I wanted to make one more point about tight end. The more I look at this, I think I would go, boy. So in terms of game script, like how do you foresee this going? So like Atlanta versus the Giants, that could be a Bijan Robinson game where they get up by a significant amount of points and don't need to throw the ball. Penix, the lean on the run game there. Lean on Algier and Bijan and not let Penix have to throw the ball very much.
Yeah.
Versus Cade Otton against Dallas. I mean, that could be very similar game script. I don't know, which depends on which Dallas you're gonna get. Is that going to be a competitive game? I tend to think that could be maybe more competitive than the other game. In which case, I think I'm going to lean Otton.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dallas can score points, whereas the Giants can't.
Giants can't. Yeah,
so at least there's a more possibility that it's close and that they'll still throw. So I would say it's like 55-45 Cade Otton right now for me.
I'm going to bump that up a little bit more than I'm seeing Kyle Pitts' snap percentage in 2 of the last 3 weeks, 40%.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so not even on the field.
Not even on the field.
No more disappointing fantasy tight end in fantasy football history than Kyle Pitts. I will say that right now. But yeah, going on against the number 1 seed Charlie next week, he's going to need all the guns he got. He needs Al Kamara. He needs Saquon to have a big game. I did say last week that Jake's make or break person for the playoffs would be Devontae Adams. So at least for this week, that turned out to be good. Maybe it's good things to go, but gets the victory in week 15.
By the way, for what it's worth,
I'm talking through my soundboard.
Sure.
That's fine.
Oh, sorry.
Come
I didn't
on,
know
man.
you were getting to work.
All right.
Well, now I started, so I may as well finish. That's what she said. For what it's worth, I don't know if Charlie set his lineup this past week. I always set my lineup regardless. I don't know if Charlie did or not, but Charlie scored 119 points this week. So if that score was
this
if
week.
that was the matchup this week, Jake would have beat him. So
Yep.
not that doesn't matter, but just saying, Charlie, 119 points in week 15.
Yep. So, but going over to the losing side here, that's going to be the Cogsville Cox, 84.36. Their season is now over. And I think there's a lot of things to talk about here, being a low score in the fantasy playoffs. But one of the most, let's just go through it first and we can talk about it. Kyler Murray, 23 to 30, 224, he rushes the ball for 11 yards. He is a conundrum and a half. I do not understand what's going on there. Josh Jacobs, though, has a nice day. 26 carries, 94 yards, a touchdown. Also catches the ball 4 times for 42 for 19.6 points. Joe Mixon comes back down to earth. Only 12 carries for 23 yards, 5 for 6, 33, 8 points against Miami. Jamar Chase, this is a good score for any other wide receiver that's not called Jamar Chase, but this is kind of a low game for him. 9 for 11, 94 yards, no touchdowns against Tennessee, in which they scored 37 points. So, you're expecting a little more there. Amari Cooper, 0 in a 48-42 game is unbelievable. I was shocked when I saw that. Just crazy how they cannot find a consistent way to use him. 0 points. And again, Deebo Samuel, just not in usage at all. 2 carries, 3 yards, 3 for 7, 16 yards. Had a really bad drop in that one as well, which incited boos from the fans because he came out with a tweet last week about how he doesn't get the ball at all. Well, he doesn't do much when he gets the ball, so only 3.4 points. Tyler Kraft, 2 for 2, 34. Brian Robinson, 21 carries, 65 yards, 3 for 3, 22, 10.2 points. Fairbairn has 8, and Arizona's defense has 6. On the bench, this is one of the good things that if you do lose, you're like, and it was your fault, you're like, oh, okay, well, I made a bad matchup decision. There was no bad matchup decisions here. Every one of the bench either didn't play, didn't score, or did very little. Jake Ferguson, 3 points. Josh Downs, 4 points. So at least Brian can take a little solace in that, that he didn't make any matchup decisions that really hurt him. First person I want to talk about is Kyler Murray. He is a enigma, and the reason I'm so passionate about that, I have him in another league, which I finished in last place in, by the way, because of Kyler Murray. Quarterback number 11, Matthew Berry's ride or die for the season, had such a disappointing year for where he was drafted. I'm just going to remind myself where he was drafted in our league. The 6th round, doesn't run the ball. Just doesn't do it. And I don't know if it's an ego thing, that he wants to show that he can throw the ball. I don't know what it is, but, I'm going to look at last year for a second. Missed a lot of the time, but, actually, you're not really even seeing that much running last year either. But it was more last year. Let's look at 2022. A lot more running in 2022. Just doesn't use the gift that he has in his legs, and it really, lowers his ceiling when you don't have that rushing production. Rushing touchdowns, only has 4 on the season. On not a very great offense, so not a very good defense, not a very good team. You think that he'd run a little more. He just did not do that in 2024.
He did not, and I think we were all fooled. Matthew Berry certainly called him his ride or die. You had a lot of other fantasy analysts. I'd listened to a lot of podcasts that actually were, one in particular that we're talking about potential MVP candidates, betting on MVP candidates, and there were a few people that said Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
He was poised, I think, for a big year. I think everything kind of felt better in Arizona. You got this new rookie, in the garage, hot rod in the garage here, break out this rookie wide receiver. And it just didn't materialize. James Conner, maybe his role in this offense has been so large that factors into it.
Yeah.
He's been so effective at the running back position that maybe the running attack didn't need to feature Murray as much. I don't know what the story was, but I can tell you I'm not going to feel very comfortable drafting him in any future year other than anything more than like a high uh, kind of lottery ticket QB2 if I
Yeah.
want that. Like he could potentially be, but the more years that go by that we don't quite see that MVP level of play, the harder it is to trust that he can be a startable fantasy option.
Yeah, I mean, he needs to be running. He needs to have 8 to 10, rushing attempts a game. He didn't even reach. His highest was 7 on the season. So just not running the ball. I don't think they're doing design runs with him. They're not being very creative on offense. I don't know if it's a new coach or not. I'm not positive about that. If it's a first year head coach there, but that's something you have to think about when you draft these people. If it's a first year head coach, how does that affect how they're going to use Kyler Murray or any other player that the past doesn't always reflect what's going to be in the future. And I think that's one of the big things with Kyler Murray this year that a lot of people didn't see, and me included.
Yep.
Going down the board here, Joe Mixon, running back number 9, he's been great all year. His third worst, fantasy week this week, only 64% snap count. Just a weird game there against Miami. His worst, his third worst yards per attempt. Just a really, I don't think you're worried about him, but it was just a blah day. You know what I mean? It just came at the wrong time for Brian this week.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you look at the starting lineup, you don't have one touchdown. I mean, that's quarterback included, and that was Josh Jacobs, who had a great day, 26 carries, touchdown, 4 for 4 through the air for 42. Like, good game for Josh Jacobs, but nobody else had a touchdown.
Yeah.
I mean, Chase had the 9 for 11 for 94, but doesn't get into the end zone. He was the second best performer on this team with 13.9 fantasy points. Otherwise, no touchdowns.
Yeah.
In Amari Cooper's case, no catches. Debo Samuel you said it in the chat, like there's going to need to be a debriefing on what went wrong with Debo Samuel this year.
Yeah.
3 for 7. Like he hasn't been a top 50 wide receiver in the last 5 weeks. Like,
and it's not like they're fully healthy. Like San Francisco is one of the most injured teams in the league. Like he's one of the only people left standing, and they still can't get on the ball.
And I know you're frequently mentioning Debo Samuel as an option in the run game, but if we just look at his numbers, I mean, not only has the volume just not been there for using him in that way, but you got to think the volume is down because the effectiveness just hasn't been there. I think teams kind of know that he can be used in that way, and he just hasn't been effective. I mean, you're seeing rushing lines like 2 for 3, 5 for 13. When Debo first came into the league and the 49ers started using him in creative ways, it was kind of a novel approach. Not many teams were doing it.
Yeah.
But I feel like now defenses have sniffed out Samuel's role in this offense, and they've just said, we're not going to let him do that to us. We're not going to let Samuel do these weird kind of reverses and out of the backfield and this
Right.
type of thing. So his effectiveness in the run game just hasn't been good. And so you can get all the carries you want, but if you're not making anything happen, it's not good for the offense, and it's not good for your fantasy team.
I think that has a lot to do with their offensive line injuries as well. They missed Trent Williams for the majority of the season, on the left tackle spot.
Yep.
Debo Samuel's not going to be running between the tackles. He's going to be on the outside. If you have a weak left tackle, that's not going to go anywhere. So I think that had a lot to do with it. But yeah, just what a disappointing season. Now wide receiver 50 to end his campaign is crazy for a guy that talented. A couple more things I wanted to go through with Brian's team. Jamar Chase, who could be the number 1 pick next year, just kind of has a dud game. I mean, Joe Burrow just looking for other options, throwing touchdowns and things like that. Chase Brown had a nice day. 13 points, completely fine. But, when everyone else, kind of struggles here, you need more. You need that 38-point game. You need that 49-point game, the 36-point game. Just didn't get it in this one. I think Tennessee just kind of tried to take him away as much as possible. Other people on the Bengals offense really delivered there for Cincinnati. But the other thing I want to talk about here, and this is going to be a little bit of a revelation, and I'll see if you agree with me here.
Revelation.
Yes.
We'll see about that. Okay.
Amari Cooper. Okay? Did, middling well with Deshaun Watson. I would have been very interested to see how he would have done with Jameis Winston. Goes to the Bills, does absolutely nothing. And in future seasons, if you have a player of Amari Cooper's talent, I would still say he's pretty talented, you got to sell high on them. You got to. Because there's the uncertainty of how they're going to be used is so great. You got to get rid of them at their peak value. So, another one, maybe not as talented, but it was having a very good season. Deontay Johnson, having a great season with Carolina, gets traded, hates his role, gets suspended, not used when he was. Even on the field, he dropped off the face of the earth, like completely. So I think that's something that a lot of teams in the future, fantasy teams, have to think about is that, it's not always, greener on the other side. Just because you're going to a high-powered offense doesn't mean you're going to be used, even if you're on a middling offense. So I think that's just a thing I kind of saw from a couple players. Even DeAndre Hopkins a little bit. I know he struggled even with Tennessee, not really doing so well with the Chiefs, just kind of middling kind of guy. But don't always think that just because they get traded to another team that their value is going to go up.
Yeah, the hard part, the tough part to swallow on that is like when this trade was made and people were anticipating that of all the teams in the NFL, the Bills were like the one that could use a wide receiver the most. And, they were relying on Khalil Shakir. And I like Khalil Shakir. I traded for him. But at the end of the day, I traded for him right before they traded for Amari Cooper. But nobody thinks that Khalil Shakir is like the prototypical number one wide receiver. Like, he's not an elite option. So the Bills theoretically needed that guy in Cooper. And Josh Allen, like, best quarterback in football, throwing the ball, at least purely from a passing perspective, you would have thought, is there a better landing spot for a guy like Amari Cooper?
Yeah, like let's say, like I told you, like, I don't know, 8 weeks ago, that Josh Allen has a 55-point day and then a 41-point day, and he has Amari Cooper. What do you think Amari Cooper's line's going to be? I mean, he had 0. He had 12 with the 1, which is fine, but he had 0. Yeah. 0 targets. No targets. Only 50% snap count. Well, really 46. So it's just wild. That's what I'm saying is that, like, even if you're traded to a high-powered offense, it doesn't mean that it's going to mesh well. And I think that goes back to a lot of, all season preparation. You don't get to have the reps, don't really know the playbook as well as you probably should, things like that. So I think that in the future we might be seeing a little more sell highs on these people that are traded.
Yeah, I mean, since he was traded, he's basically been around 50% snap percentage. Before that, on the Browns, he's in the 80s and 90s. It's crazy to think that had Amari Cooper stayed on the Browns, he would have more fantasy points with Jameis Winston than he would with the Bills.
He would have.
The Bills took a chance. They traded a third-round pick next year and a 2026 seventh-round pick. So not nothing. Giving up a third-rounder, and they took on, like, very little of his salary, like $800,000
Browns
of it.
Don't care about
He's
salary.
A free agent.
Yeah.
He's a free agent after the year, so they probably won't. Well, I don't know. We'll see. Clearly, they haven't had chemistry. Something is up there, and disappointing for sure.
Amari Cooper is a prototypical Raven signing next year.
Next year, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, a 1 year, $15 million deal.
Proven. Yep.
Yeah,
and by the way, you can imagine. Sorry, we're sticking on this a long time. Like, there's some like dissatisfaction there. Same. You mentioned Deontay Johnson. Cooper, I think. How old is he?
30.
Okay, so he's getting up there, but he's still, for a wide receiver, you think you probably still have some years left. Like, to come to the Bills and to not get the type of like he's a free agent. He needs to sign a contract for the
Right.
Bills to utilize him. He's not happy there. You know
Right.
he's not happy.
The one
And
thing
so
I
there's
will
something
say
deeper.
about Amari Cooper is that he is not a drama guy. He was never a
Mm,
drama guy. You never heard anything about him with the Browns. You never really heard anything about him when he was with Dallas. Back in the day, he
or
was with Dallas.
yeah,
So he's just not that type of guy, I don't think. So
right.
I think he's a team player. He's not being used. And it's the Josh Allen show. Everyone come for the ride. If you're not on it, too bad. I think that's kind of where it is right now.
Yep.
But yeah, Brian, you know, just a tough week, but he can take some solace in the fact that he didn't make any bad decisions. It was just a bad week for him where he ran into a team that was a little better. So, Cox's Cox, you are eliminated from the Beltway Wars Invitational Playoffs. Thank you. See, you got my cue there. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I didn't. I was just waiting to talk about the last matchup on our.
Okay, well, I wasn't sure you wanted to go to this one, but our last matchup would be the Pikesville Pink Pony Club, scratching out a victory against the Westminster Warbirds, 122.50 to 120.74. Before we get started, anything you want to say? Lifetime against Dustin since at least 2020. You are 2-6 against Dustin, so struggling against him for whatever reason seems to be your kryptonite. You know, since this league has been created.
It goes beyond. It goes far beyond that. Like I don't have the numbers or the backup data to prove this, but like I remember specifically walking the hallways of Century High School saying, Dustin, how do you beat me every time? Like this goes back to pre-Beltway Wars, like whatever fantasy leagues we were in high school. Dustin did this to me. Like it's been forever. It's just this thing, and whether or not it's me trying the karma play by texting him before the game and telling me he's going to win, and him calling me out on it, which he did. He's like, he said, don't use your fantasy karma play on me, whatever. I knew I was going to be in trouble with Lamar Jackson, and that's what happened. And
Yeah.
it's the reason I lost this game. That Waddle will get into, but Lamar Jackson. I've never been more disappointed to watch Lamar Jackson throw touchdowns. Like just 5 touchdowns. Like, are you kidding me? Like, could this have just been a Derrick Henry game? Like, could
It
the
had all
Ravens
the
have just
writings of a
opened?
Derrick Henry game. Like,
Right? That's what I thought.
yeah,
I don't know. So
yeah.
just annoying. I mean, I think he was pissed losing to the Eagles, his NFC record, right? Like he had been so good against the NFC and then lost to the Eagles and wanted
The
to
only
come out
other
and
team he
prove it
lost
against
to
the
was the Giants, too.
right. I was at that game too. So with Dustin. But yeah, to 5 touchdowns on 25 passes, it's like okay, and like enough. Listen to Adam. Like use Henry. I mean, just for just this game. Like I don't know. So
Yeah.
frustrating, but it is what it is.
Well, let's go through Dustin's roster here. Lamar Jackson, as you said, 36 points, 21-25, 290, 5 touchdowns. Also carries the ball for 65 yards. Can't be overlooked there. Does lose a fumble, but 36 points on the day. Roger Stevenson, 13 carries, 69 for 9 points. Perfectly fine for his caliber of player. DeAndre Swift, 19 carries, 79 yards, 1 catch for 10. Justin Jefferson, 7 for 13, 73 and a touchdown. Gave a shout out to Randy Moss after that touchdown catch, who's dealing with liver cancer. Drake London, 3 for 3, 53 and a touchdown. Cortland Sutton, kind of a down game, very inefficient, but does get in the end zone, 3 for 9, 32 yards and a touchdown. Also a down game, Brock Bowers, 3 for 6, 35. Adam Thielen, who was a big discussion point for us last week, 5 for 7, 51, kind of a quiet day for 7.6 points. Dicker the kicker has 6, and Baltimore's defense has 9. Looking on the bench, couple names, I guess. We like to talk about kickers and defenses. Green Bay plays New Orleans next week. Baltimore plays Pittsburgh. So that could be a little bit of a, can Dustin get over his homer edge and actually start, Green Bay next week? And also Keenan Allen, he can't pick the right. He doesn't start any of them, but he can't pick the right one. Keenan Allen goes off 82 yards and a touchdown for 17 points. First thing I did want to talk about, going back to Lamar Jackson, number one quarterback, number one overall in terms of fantasy points. Is there a scenario where next year he goes in the first round?
Who?
Lamar.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if anyone deserves to go there, it's probably him,
Or
right?
Josh Allen.
Of the quarterbacks.
Or Josh
I don't
Allen.
know. Yeah, I mean, did we have? Well, yeah,
We didn't.
well, okay. I thought we had one in the second round. We didn't have one until the third round. Probably. Oh,
It could be at the turn. Like, at the turn of the second round, you could pull the trigger on Lamar. And I don't think you wouldn't be unjustified to do that.
it wouldn't be. I mean, historically, we haven't had him go that or any of the quarterbacks go. I don't know. I'd be
I don't know.
curious
Charlie
to
used to
look
pick
back.
Patrick Mahomes in the first round all the time, and it seems to be doing fine for him. So,
Yeah, yeah. I
but
don't
yeah,
know.
I mean,
Maybe.
I think that just shows how good he's been. You know, he's the opposite of Kyler Murray. Look at his rushing attempts: 12, 11, 9, 8, 7, 8, 8, 6. All, basically 5 yards per carry. They use him. They use design runs. Um, you know, and he just does it all. He throws touchdowns. He only has 3 picks on the year. Now I know his fumbling's been a little bit of an issue, but 34 touchdowns, 3 interceptions is MVP numbers. So if anyone deserves to be picked in the first round next year, I think out of the quarterbacks, I think it would be Lamar Jackson. Going, yeah,
Yep.
okay. Uh, Going through his team though, I see a tiny bit of issues. I wonder what Kenneth Walker's going to do. Is this status to be determined for Week 16?
Yeah, I don't like that.
No, no. And again, as I mentioned before, Seattle, not really a team that has anything to play for. They're kind of done. So, looking at your top two running backs are Stevenson and Swift. And they've been very much up and down, both on bad offenses. Swift hasn't scored 10 points in 4 weeks. Stevenson is running back number 24. Scored 10 and 13, but again, running back number 24. So low end running back 2. We know the star power at the wide receiver position. How concerned are you with, let's say Kenneth Walker doesn't play, Swift has Detroit next week, and Stevenson has Buffalo next week. Can they do enough to, can they do enough where the wide receivers do enough, but can they carry up the end and do enough to get Dustin past Sarah next week?
I mean, for the Patriots and Stevenson, it's about can they sniff the end zone at all? I mean, like, sure, Stevenson's good, pretty solid for 8 to 10 fantasy points, but in terms of getting into the end zone, he hasn't done it since week number 9. I mean, Buffalo is a team that you can run against a little bit more so than passing, but I don't feel great about it. Swift has a really tough matchup
It's a
at
revenge
Detroit.
game. It's a
It
revenge.
is a revenge game. Interesting storyline to watch there. At least promising that Swift came into this game banged up. There was thought that he might miss. I certainly was hoping so. Dustin had Kendry Miller, a free agent pickup a couple days prior, listed as the auto sub in case Swift missed this game. That would have handed me the victory had Swift missed this game. I was hoping Swift would miss this game. He plays 70% of snaps, so he didn't have any downturn in snaps. 19 carries is actually his most since week number 5. So, and his yards per carry, 4.16, is his highest since week 11. So, like a solid game from Swift.
Yeah.
The matchup sucks. Not having Walker will suck. Dustin's going to play against Sarah, so both of them kind of dealing with, significant running back injuries right now. Walker for Dustin and Montgomery for Sarah. But look, even if Walker plays, here's the thing. He's playing against Minnesota, who, like Detroit, is a very, very, very good running defense. And he hasn't played since week 13. He's missed 2 straight games.
Yeah.
So, like, is he going to be 100% against Minnesota? A Minnesota team that I believe has a shot at winning the division.
They had
Now,
a shot for the first round
yeah.
bye.
So, like, that team is quietly very, very good. They're overshadowed in the division sometimes by the Lions and the hype that they get, but like, I don't love that matchup for Walker, even if he plays.
Yeah, and with the severity of the injury and with how Charbonnet has played, you can't imagine that he's going to get a full workload his first game back. So
Yeah, absolutely.
the tough matchup versus the workload, you're not sure. You don't. He said the notes say he had a good workout Monday, but do you throw him right in there? I'm not sure about that. Is he a stud enough where you just play him, you start your studs, or is he, do you have better options here? That remains to be seen for Dustin.
Yeah, by the way, speaking of tough matchups, like, we should just mention that Lamar Jackson is 2-5 against the Steelers in his career.
Yeah,
So, like,
and he doesn't
that's
do
a
well
team
against them.
he's had a lot of trouble. So we're going to see very early Saturday what Dustin's chances look like, especially if he starts the Ravens defense, and that could not be good potentially. At least it's home for the Ravens.
I mean, you can't bench him. Even
Yeah,
Rodgers has a good matchup against the Rams, but
can't bench him. Nope.
you can't bench him. So
Nope.
another little thing I kind of wanted to talk about with Dustin's squad is Drake London.
Mhm.
Now wide receiver number 8, so you like that, but quarterback change could be coming here. Now obviously he's wide receiver number 8, so you're starting him, but the expectations might have to be a little lower. The inefficiency. He only had 3 targets in this one, but the prior 2 he had 10 and 16. You could see those targets go down with Michael Penix. Them relying more on the run, play action, things of that nature. Not as deep balls, things like that. Maybe he runs a little bit more. He's a very athletic quarterback. So that's just something very interesting that if Penix does start, how does that affect Drake London's value in the most important games of the season?
Um, I mean, did they? So he is the starter.
They said that it's undetermined right now. I think it's like an open competition at practice this week.
It's really. I mean, man,
Cousins hasn't
that's
been good
just
though.
it's just not a situation that you want to experiment with if you're a fantasy manager of Drake London.
Yeah, I mean,
that
over the
you want to
last 3 games,
experiment.
Cousins has 7 interceptions, 1 touchdown. Right, actually, over the last 5, he has 9 interceptions, 1 touchdown.
It's the devil you know versus the devil you don't, and at the very least, you could say that London has 12 or more fantasy points in 3 of his last 5.
Yeah.
So, and in the other 2 games, at least he's not killing you. Last week he had 9 against Minnesota. So, like, I think I'd prefer the safety of Cousins versus the unknown of Penix at this point if I'm Dustin.
Yeah. Also, another thing on top of that, Spencer Rattler, quarterbacking for the Raiders. It's not Garner Minshew. It's not Aiden O'Connell right now. I don't know if they're playing. It says Aiden O'Connell trending towards playing Week 16, so that'd actually be really good news for Dustin. As
You said Rattler, but Rattler's on the Saints.
Riddler, or yeah.
Oh yeah, Ritter.
Desmond
Yeah.
Ritter.
Former Falcon.
Yeah, but it's looking like Aiden O'Connell's going to play, so that's really going to help Brock Bowers' value. He looks for him. So the last 2 games where he hasn't played, it's only 6 and 5, but better days ahead, you would think, for Brock Bowers after 2 straight kind of disappointing games.
Yep. By the way, one thing to mention here that kind of is something to keep an eye on. Kendry Miller, Dustin's
that's
pickup
true.
as a backup. Yeah, there you go. House money. If Kamara misses this game, Kendry Miller is a guy that the Saints like. they have had a really good running game this season with Kamara. Kendry Miller has fresh legs, right? He hasn't played very much this season. He appears to be healthy. You know, he has nine carries this week for 46 yards. That's 5 yards a clip. Got into the end zone in week 14 against the Giants. Has the Packers on Monday night. So, like, I mean, if the situation gets dire, and I don't know, it's interesting, at least if you
Oh, for
monitor the
sure.
reports. And
You got to start him
I
if he's the starter.
guess so.
With a rookie quarterback, you have to. They're going to run the
Yeah,
ball, or at least they're going to try.
yeah,
It's just funny to me. This is kind of off topic, but like how much the Saints hate Jamal Williams. It's very funny. He's still on the team. He's 2 years removed from having double-digit touchdowns with the Lions. It's just kind of interesting that they, just stay away from him at all costs. It's just kind of interesting to me.
yeah.
Anything else with Dustin's squad?
No, other than the Kendry Miller thing, I was kind of watching it closely. Like I knew that Swift and Walker were both, questionable. Walker turned to doubtful. Kind of thought if Swift missed the game, I was thinking about, preemptively. Dustin tends to make roster moves late in the week. He doesn't sort of bite early. I'm not really sure why. I guess I shouldn't question it. He beat me. But I was just curious, like Kendry Miller, I was keeping an eye on other running backs and thought about picking one or two up preemptively to sort of block. The guy I had my eye on was Jaleel McLaughlin, actually, um,
Mm,
for the
yeah,
Broncos. And when I saw that Dustin picked up Kendry Miller, I was kind of like, I don't know that I like that. Like there were three or four other guys in free agency that I thought, if Swift is going to miss this game, I think I'm okay with him starting Kendry Miller. It would have given me the win, but he did get 9 carries in this one. So just a little backroom in the mind of the manager here on my side of things.
yeah.
Thinking about blocking, thinking about trying to put Dustin into a corner, but he won.
Yeah, so Dustin now moves on to the next round against Sarah. There was a little bit of trash talking going on in the Beltway Wars Invitational chat. Uh, it was something about sending her back to the kitchen. I'm not exactly sure what the text message said, but good to see a little bit of participation in the chat from Dustin, who is usually very silent, but very loud when he wins. But going over to the losing side here, that'd be you, of course, Westminster Warbirds. Their season ends with 120.74. Going through your roster, Joe Burrow, 26 for 37, 3 touchdowns, does throw 2 picks, which really hurts you. 16.8 points against Tennessee. Kendrick Miller, or not, oh my gosh, Kyron Williams. I don't know, Kendrick Miller. Kyron Williams, 29 carries, 108 for 12 points. Chua Hubbard, 10 for 34, 4 for 17. Really disappointing, against Dallas. You thought that he'd be getting a lot more than what he did, against a weak defense. Shakir, 6 for 7, 39 and a touchdown. Jalen Waddle leaves this game, is day to day, but that doesn't help you at all. He left this one with a knee injury, 0 points on the day. A.J. Brown has a nice day, though. 8 for 11, 110 and a touchdown for 21 points against Pittsburgh. T.J. Hawkinson, 5 for 7, 52, 7 points. James Cook, has a nice day. 14 carries, 105, 2 touchdowns for 25 points. Luntz has 8, and the Washington defense has 9. Nothing really on the bench other than Denver's defense scoring 20. I don't think that was the wrong play. Anthony Richardson can go off. He's a running quarterback. It's hard to play against. Washington going against a rookie quarterback, you like that matchup a lot, so I'm not going to hate you too much on that one. My interesting thing, because we had a conversation about this before the matchup started, you were thinking about starting Bucky Irving over James Cook.
Yeah.
You didn't. So good on you for sticking to your guns there with James Cook. But what was the rationale behind that kind of discussion that you were having with yourself?
Well, that James Cook is coming off of a week which he had 6 carries against the Rams for 3 fantasy points. So coming into a matchup against Detroit, a team that has a really good defense generally and is not very fantasy friendly to running backs. Just concerns about him getting into the end zone. Concerns that that could sneakily, for some reason, be a low-scoring game with both defenses playing really well, and that Bucky Irving, if I need a lottery ticket to beat Dustin, um, Bucky Irving was of all my running backs is the guy that's most capable right now, in fact, of like having the 20-point game. Um, like he has been a revelation
Yeah.
for the Buccaneers in the second half of the season. He had back-to-back huge games for them in weeks 12 and 13, 24 and 26 points. I thought if I needed a lottery ticket, it would be him.
Mm-hmm.
And I could have easily seen Cook have a down game. It turns out that it's Hubbard was the guy I should have been thinking about subbing, and had I subbed Hubbard out for Bucky, that would have been the difference there in a victory. Hubbard, this carousel of 4 running backs has plagued me. I've picked the wrong one in most of the last couple weeks to bench. Um, I started Hubbard for 2 fantasy points in week 13. I sat him for 18 points in week 14, and I start him again here in 15. Dallas, again, as you mentioned, a good matchup, 6 fantasy points. So just pick the wrong running backs. Had 4 good ones, had a 5th one, traded him away midseason. Um, as well, I'm complaining about midseason things, Rashee Rice getting hurt.
Yeah.
Probably the reason why Waddle was in there, because I lacked that sort of solid second wide receiver. Just didn't quite have enough at the end of the day. The Commanders thing I will defend. The Broncos had a decent matchup, but the Commanders against Jake Haener, I've watched Jake Haener play before. He's terrible. He was so terrible in this game that he got benched after halftime, I believe. I think the Saints had like 32 yards at halftime of offense, period. So like that was looking great for a while. They brought in, who was it in that game that came in and ended up being competent enough to score 13, 19 points? So like that could have been a bigger game. Had they left Haener in the game, that point total would have been higher and I would have won. So lots of coulda, woulda, shouldas. At the end of the day, just didn't have quite enough for Dustin in week 16.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of coulda, woulda, shouldas, if Baltimore doesn't get that pick at the end of the game, you win. Like, they don't pick the ball at all this season. They don't have, like, barely any interceptions. They drop the ball like crazy. If they didn't have that at the end of the game, you would have won by, 0.2, actually.
Yeah,
so,
I didn't think about that.
Yeah. Oh,
same thing. Sutton, by the way, his touchdown was way late in that one.
Yeah, but I mean, Sutton's been good all year. I mean, that's to be expected.
Yeah, he has.
So, my other question for you is kind of going back to draft night a little bit, and
No, I would not take Kyler Murray over Joe Burrow. If that's what you're asking, I would not do it. I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah, that was a good call by you. Very, very good. My question for you is really waiting on tight end. And it didn't really seem to work out too well in your favor. Waiting on TJ Hawkinson, I think he was out, maybe not a little bit longer, but, only has 2 games of over 10 points. Sam Darnold there, you're not really sure how that's going to go. Kirk Cousins looked for him a lot, but different quarterbacks now. Do you kind of regret that decision of, and maybe this is more for the draft recap, but just in terms of TJ Hawkinson, would you wish you would have picked, a tight end? You picked Hawkinson in the 11th round, like, a tight end in the 7th, 6th round?
Well, not in the 6th because I got Rashee Rice in the 6th.
Okay.
So, I wouldn't change that. And then I took Ridley in the 7th. The guy I really wanted was Evan Engram, who was taken earlier in the 7th. So, had Engram gotten to the 7th, now that wouldn't have worked out very well for me either. Engram was not good this year. I ended up with Freiermuth, and he was serviceable for a while. In fact, as the season went on, he's had 3 straight games of 8 or more fantasy points, so he's had some of his best games lately.
Yeah.
So I mean, yes, in a in a vacuum, would I have liked to get a tight end earlier? Yes. I just did not feel like, of course, Njoku and Bowers went in the 8th round. So, like, yeah, maybe
Yeah.
should have thought about one of those guys. But yeah, I don't know. Look, Njoku was not as good until Watson was out. He missed a few games as well. Bowers, the rookie tight end, it's not something I typically believe in. So I don't know. I in a vacuum, yes, but not on this draft board.
Okay, but you know, lost this one out of the fantasy playoffs. I'm not even sure if you have a matchup next week. I guess you would play for like 5th place
Yeah, I don't know how that works
against,
out.
but overall, I mean, you had an impressive season. Just kind of petered out at the end. Um, very close matchup, but 8-6, good season, and you'll be waiting on the sideline like the rest of us, watching who's going to take this Beltway Wars Invitational Championship home. But your season, as I try to find my sound, is over.
By the way,
They
who
ask you
who
how you
would have
are.
thought
They
that
ask you
like
they ask you how you
Chuba
are, and you
Hubbard
just
was
want
going
to
to be
say
a
that you're
fantasy
fine
starter
when you're not
like every
really
week
fine, but you
for
just
the
can't get
season?
into it because they
Talking
don't
through my
understand.
sound effect.
Uh,
It's fine. All right. Yeah, but True Hubbard, I mean, yeah. I mean, running back 14, no one saw that happening. You drafted him in the 10th round. Um, had a good season.
Yeah, 2 rounds after I drafted Jonathan Brooks, who
Right. Right.
didn't get a start.
So, we're not going to really get into next week's matchup. We'll save that for next week as we get the results. But it's going to be Charlie versus Jake, and then Sarah versus Dustin. Hope to see a little bit of trash talk a little bit. And that's it for week
No,
15.
it's not. No, it's not.
What?
I wanted to just take a quick look at the 4 teams remaining and how their playoff history
Okay.
here.
Yes, Pat wants to do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah,
As we're
so
going on
we've
an hour
got.
30.
We'll start with our number 1 seed, Charlie. Playoff history. Charlie, in 9 seasons in the league going into this year, has a first place finish, so has gotten that first championship. Um, Adam doesn't know about that yet. Third place has a
Wow, the stray. The stray blood on me.
sorry. Third. Neither does Dustin or Sarah yet, but third place finish. So basically 2 top 3 finishes. Overall playoff record of 3-2. So we'll see if Charlie can get his second this season. We also have, who should we go to next? Who's our
Sarah.
next highest seed? Sarah. Let's go
She's
with
a 2.
Sarah. The 2 seed, Sarah, has been in the league for 11 years coming into this year. She has a second and a third, so 2 top 3 finishes, and overall playoff record of 2-4. So she got her third win this previous week, and she can get to the championship and even up her playoff record with a win in week 16. Moving on to probably, I don't know, let's go with Jake. Jake, 11 seasons. He did win it back in 2014. It was his. He also had a second place last year. So looking to follow up with 2, top 3 performances here, back-to-back years. Overall playoff record 5-4. Got the win in week 1, so 6-4 now in the playoffs. And our final team, Dustin, as I mentioned today, 1 top 3 performance was a third place in 2013. 12 seasons in the league, so a veteran, one of 4 teams to play in every season of the Beltway Wars Invitational. Playoff record of 2-6 coming into the year, so 3-6. Has basically, let's see, last year he went 1-1. So gets his first win. He's up to 3-6 this year. So, yeah, 2 teams that could win their first championship and 2 teams that could win their second left in the Beltway Wars Invitational.
Okay, but that is our show, guys. We will be back next week to go over the semifinals and preview the finals for you. But with that, that's all we have for week 15. We'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Thank you for listening and your support. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify.